In the Bible, the city is not just a setting. It is a character, a symbol, a battlefield. And sometimes it is even a promise. From the very first pages, when fear and guilt push someone to build walls and call it home, to the final visions of a city where life flows again like a river, the biblical narrative uses cities to show how we organize the world, and how the world, without us realizing it, organizes us. Cities can protect, but they can also imprison. They can generate culture, commerce, and beauty, but they can also concentrate power, violence, and injustice. So, when the Bible speaks of Babylon, Jerusalem, the city on a hill, and the New Jerusalem, it is not just citing places. It is poking at a question that hurts and fascinates at the same time. What kind of people do we become when we live within the walls? Have you ever noticed how sometimes the Bible seems to film the human heart in a close-up? Before the blade, before the blood on the ground, comes the warning. Sin is crouching at the door, like a beast ready to pounce, but one that can still be mastered. Genesis chapter 4, verse 7. Cain, however, lets rage take the wheel. He kills Abel, and the text does not romanticize it. The crime tears the earth, and the earth responds. The punishment is not just legal, it is existential, living without ground, without direction, with the weight of what he did. And from this, an ancient fear is born: they will find me. But the desert is not just emptiness, it is a laboratory of choices. Expelled, Cain goes to the land of Nod, east of Eden, and there he builds a city and names it after his son, Enoch. Genesis chapter 4, verses 12 to 17. Notice the detail. In the narrative, the first city does not spring from a collective dream, but from a man trying to survive his own history. In the ancient world, a wall was not an ornament. It was a "do not enter." It was a "here I rule." The city becomes a response to terror. If guilt pursues me, I raise stone upon stone and call that security. But between us, when fear becomes the foundation, what grows inside? Imagine a place where the wall not only separates us and them, but becomes a school of behavior. Cain's genealogy in Genesis does not just describe descendants, it describes a climate. At a certain point, Lamech appears, who delivers a terrifying poem speech. He boasts of having killed a man for wounding him and promises multiplied vengeance. Genesis chapter 4, verses 23 and 24. It is as if the logic of the newborn city says, wounded honor is washed with blood, and security is bought with threat. The monster that began in one man's chest becomes culture. Within the community's limits, fear becomes the rule, and violence gains the status of justice. And here comes the counterintuitive detail. The same sequence shows creativity exploding from the ground. Jabal is associated with tents and livestock, Jubal with music and instruments, Tubal-Cain with working metals like bronze and iron. That is, the city is also a workshop, a stage, a laboratory. Where many people gather, specializations, technology, art, and exchanges emerge, something that archaeology confirms by observing how ancient urban centers concentrated crafts and innovation. The Bible then does not demonize the agglomeration itself. It reveals a dilemma. The same place that manufactures harps and tools can also manufacture armed vanity. The question left hanging in the air is simple and dangerous. Who commands the city? Creativity or vengeance? Now swap the close-up of the heart for the wide shot of a gigantic construction. People, brick, bitumen, and a project that seems just engineering, but is ambition in the form of architecture. In Genesis chapter 11, everyone speaks the same language and decides to build a city with a tower whose top may reach unto heaven to make us a name and avoid dispersion. It is not about a telescope, it is about status, climbing up to secure oneself. The text puts its finger on the wound of urban power. Centralize, control, standardize, and when unity serves pride, the city becomes a stage for self-exaltation. There is a detail that many people overlook. Genesis calls this place Babel, in the land of Shinar, and the biblical tradition connects this image to what later becomes Babylon, a symbol of empire, propaganda, and domination. Historically, Mesopotamia knew ziggurats, tower temples that marked the center of cities, and Babylon itself became famous for monumental projects. The Bible uses this imagery to speak of a system that wants to touch the sky without being accountable to anyone. The twist is ironic. The name they try to make dissolves in confusion, and the fear of scattering becomes exactly the trigger for dispersion. What kind of peace is born from a tower in the center? Think with me. Two centers, two logics, two ways of organizing life. On one side, ancient cities built around towers, palaces, or elevated temples, high points for surveillance, accumulation, and control. On the other, the Garden of Eden described in Genesis chapter 2, with a spring in the center that divides into rivers and flows out, irrigating everything around. It is not just a beautiful landscape, it is symbolic economics. The city concentrates inward and protects with walls. The garden distributes outward and trusts that there is enough. One is born from the anxiety of losing, the other from the security of being cared for. This difference changes everything, including the idea of peace. In the imperial cities of the ancient Near East, peace came from threat. Strong armies, exemplary punishments, well-managed fear, something visible in Assyrian and Babylonian inscriptions. In the garden, however, peace does not need to be imposed because life flows. The Bible uses this contrast as a moral lens. When the center is a tower, climbing becomes an obsession. When the center is a tree of life, growing means sharing. Can these two worlds one day occupy the same space? And it is precisely when you expect a "let's return to the garden" that the story takes an unexpected turn. Instead of erasing cities from the map, the biblical narrative shows God choosing to work within them. David enters the scene, an unlikely shepherd who becomes king and makes Jerusalem, until then a Jebusite fortress, the political and symbolic center of Israel. When the ark, a sign of the divine presence, is brought there, the city's heart changes function. No longer a tower of exaltation, but a meeting point between heaven and earth. The city begins to breathe a different rhythm. The poetic and historical texts speak of this period as a time of relative justice, stability, and abundance, albeit limited and fragile. Jerusalem begins to be sung as a place where life flourishes and from where blessings spread, an image that echoes ancient psalms and the idea of Zion as a city of refuge. The message is subtle but powerful. Walls do not have to serve only fear. They can protect something greater than the collective ego, but every construction depends on who holds the keys. And as history progresses, one can feel that the test is not yet over. But a crack in character is enough for the infiltration to begin. The same David who danced bringing the ark now manipulates letters, soldiers, and silences to cover up adultery, sending Uriah to the front line until death. The king who should guard the city repeats Cain's gesture, trading responsibility for elimination. From then on, Jerusalem feels the domino effect: domestic violence, disputes over the throne, blood inside the palace. Like a documentary without a soundtrack, the Bible lets the facts speak. When power yields to the inner monster, the whole city pays the price. The subsequent kings oscillate between temporary breaks and free falls, while prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah denounce the city that has become a market of injustice, where the poor are crushed and faith becomes a facade. Archaeology confirms times of inequality and political instability in the late monarchic period, a perfect scenario for collapse. And it comes. Babylon, that old image of the wall empire, besieges Jerusalem and destroys it in the year 686 BC. The shock is not just military, it is theological. If even the garden city fell, the question keeps echoing among the ruins. Could the problem never have been the city, but who inhabits it? From the ashes, silence is not born, but promise. While Jerusalem is on the ground, prophets begin to speak of a city that does not yet exist, but already smells of life. Full streets, banquets, justice flowing like a river. Nations arriving not to wage war, but to learn. Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Micah describe a place where death loses space and violence no longer dictates the rhythm. It is not just urban reconstruction, it is new creation. The future city would not be raised by fear or human glory, but by a presence that transforms everything around it. This hope becomes historical fuel. Centuries later, under the heavy rule of Herod and the surveillance of Rome, Jesus appears, curiously far from the center of power. He begins in Galilee, a peripheral region, announcing that the kingdom of God has arrived. Instead of swords, he speaks of forgiveness. Instead of walls, of love for the enemy. And he utters a disconcerting phrase, "You are the city on the hill." That is, the promised city does not begin in stone, but in people. A community that lives without the logic of vengeance becomes a visible sign of another possible world. And when this happens, you can feel it. The spiritual map is changing location. A moment arrives when two urban logics face each other head-on. To maintain the peace of Jerusalem, the leaders resort to the old method: eliminate the threat. Jesus is judged, executed outside the walls, and hung on a cross, the classic instrument of Roman terror. Only the script is flipped. In the trial itself, he speaks of enthronement, of a kingdom that does not depend on the force of death. The resurrection, witnessed by followers and recorded in the first Christian texts, breaks the cycle. If death no longer commands, fear loses its post, and cities driven by terror begin to lose their main fuel. From then on, the first Christians begin to live a dual citizenship. They care for the cities where they are, as Jeremiah advises the exiles, but they know they belong to another reality. The last book of the Bible closes the narrative arc with the image of the New Jerusalem descending from heaven. Without a centralizing temple, with a river of life flowing, trees that heal nations, and gates always open. No walls out of fear. The story does not end with humans ascending to heaven, but with heaven invading the earth. And the final question does not ask for a quick answer. If this is the city that is coming, what kind of citizen are you being now? In the end, the Bible does not tell the history of cities to talk about ancient urbanism, but to reveal an uncomfortable mirror of the human condition. Every city is born from a choice: to protect life or to armor fear, to share or to accumulate, to open gates or to reinforce walls. From Cain to Babylon, from Jerusalem to the New Jerusalem, the narrative thread insists on the same question, crossing centuries, empires, and cultures. Today, surrounded by concrete, algorithms, markets, and invisible borders, we continue to decide what kind of city we are helping to build with our values, our silences, and our actions. If the biblical story points to a city where life flows and death does not govern, then the challenge is not to imagine the future. It is to live now, as if that future were already knocking at the door.